Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSikho. So, these are the articles that we will be discussing for today. Firstly, stop press. So, this basically talks about the actions of censorship in a way that are taken by the courts, and specifically, if we talk about the Supreme Court of India, wherein in some of the other way it tries to null the freedom of speech and expression of the people, and how is it detrimental for the actual fabric of fundamental rights in India will be studied in this article. And secondly, beyond the barriers of disability, which is again from the Hindu. And as yesterday itself we discussed at length that how much is it important for us to bring at par the persons with disabilities, and how much is it important for us to take steps in this regard. So today, almost an extension to that, to yesterday's article will be discussed, and basically it specifically gives the correct the statistics that are available for the disabled people in India and also at the world around. So we'll discuss that in detail. And thirdly, we have the news and flash column. Before that, let's have a look at the LawSikho courses that we have for you. So we would like to offer to you the Lord of the courses, which is the Judiciary Test Prep course. The link to this course is available in the description box. You can have a look at it, and you can also download free study material from the landing page for yourself. There are various other courses as well for CLAT, All India Bar Exam, etc. And we are very shortly coming up with courses like UPSC Law Optional as well. You may have a look at it too. Now, this is the multiple choice question for the day. In how many countries is Queen Elizabeth the head of the state? So you have to, so how many countries take Queen Elizabeth as being the head of their own state? First, 3, second, 6, third, 10, or fourth, 15. So if you know the answer or the correct answer to this question, you may jot it down in the comment section below. Let's see that what is the length or descriptive question for the day. Have we truly been able to make our society inclusive and participative for the differently abled? What can be done to encourage greater acceptance of people with disabilities in our society? So basically, you have to analyze this question into two aspects. That firstly, have we been able actually to make our society inclusive and participative or not? And secondly, if not, or wherever there are some lacuna, what can be the possible steps that we can take in this direction? The answer to this question must be written within a word limit of 250 words. With this, let's start with the discussion for the day, which talks about omnibus orders against publication. Basically, recently the Andhra Pradesh High Court has passed an interim order imposing ban on the media and also even social media for mentioning anything related to FIR, which is the first information report by the police against former Advocate General of Andhra Pradesh. So basically, we know that very recently itself, the Supreme Court had shed its shoulder of the criminal contempt case actually, that it was running against Prashant Bhushan. And that was also something wherein the Supreme Court was highly criticized as being oversensitive to various issues related to its own dignity and functioning. Now, then again, another example has been set by the Andhra Pradesh High Court, where it has passed an interim order imposing ban on the media and even on the social media from mentioning any information that is related to the FIR, which is filed by the police related to the Advocate General of Andhra Pradesh. Now, let's understand as to why such order of putting ban on the media, including the social media, is considered to be questionable and violative by the people at large. Firstly, there is no material to justify such censorship. Now, obviously, there are some issues that are, very sensitive in nature, and they have, the potential to disturb the social fabric or harmony or, the moral grounds in the society. But if in this case, if we consider it specifically, no material or there is no any specific logical ground to justify such censorship in the first place. Secondly, there is a greater need for media coverage and public scrutiny as the allegation is against the government. So, see, many allegations have recently already been put up on the courts in India, that instead of being the judicial courts or the courts that are based on rights, they have actually become more of what we call as executive courts. Now, why the reason why we are calling criticizing the courts to have become the executive courts is because the courts have not been really efficient in taking any major decisions against the government or the executive. This actually shows that the courts in many situations is falling puppets in the hands of government, and thus the justice that we actually used to seek out from the courts is not being availed today. And that is why this judgment also, or this matter also that actually is against the government, needs more of media coverage and scrutiny from the end of media, so that a greater chance exists for the people to reach towards the truth, whatever it is. And thirdly, it prevents legitimate comment, because obviously, defamation and other things are there, obviously, like contempt and criminal contempt as well. But there is also something very highly acceptable concept which we know as the fair criticism. Now, fair criticism is something that is very crucial for the transparent functioning of any body. Now, in such a scenario, if we curb or we put such blanket bans on media, and even including social media, and specifically when it comes to the cases that are against the functioning of the government, it basically would prevent the legitimate comment, which would be really, really detrimental for the transparent functioning that we are all looking forward to. Now, let's see that when the court can order injunction against publication. Now, obviously, there can be nothing so absolute in nature. So wherein such ban is questioned in the recent case, obviously there are some liberties and some areas that are granted to the courts to put bans and to even, grant injunction over some publications. Now, those grounds can be, firstly, to prevent possible defamation and prevent invasion of privacy. Now, obviously, like if something, or if there is a case that has a nature wherein if a particular information is published, it would really hamper the privacy of the individuals or the parties that are associated in that particular case. For example, let's consider the very recent case. If there is a case that is going on for COVID-19. Now, if there is any attempt that is made to put forward the exact names, address, and personal details of the person associated, then definitely it will be a question on the privacy of those individuals or the patients. And in such a scenario, such publication can be very much be banned, or can be an injunction can be put by the court on publication of such information. So if there is a possible chance of defamation or invasion of privacy, then an injunction can be put up on the publication by the court. Secondly, if there is, it is aimed at protecting fairness of a trial or investigation, because many a times what we see as a very, very propagated issue these days is of the media trial. So if there is any specific, information or specific witness or any kind of lead information that is available, that might have the potential to affect the fairness or the fair trial of any particular case or investigation, that might also be, the court might allow that thing to not be published in the public domain. So the Supreme Court, in the case of Sahara versus SEBI in 2012, it was held that the court can grant preventive relief on a balancing of the right to free trial and free press. So basically, the court in Sahara versus SEBI 2012, it's a very beautiful judgment wherein came that it said that preventive relief, or in this sense, injunction can be granted in such a manner that it hits the right balance of reaching the right to free trial as well as right to free press and information as well. So none of the rights, neither of the court or of the parties included in a particular trial or of the press or people at large are hampered, and thus in such a manner preventive relief can be put up. Now, just a very good example to this is that recently Supreme Court passed a stay order on the publication of Sudarshan TV's Halla Bol. Now, this has been a highly debated issue wherein there is this program called as Halla Bol, which is telecasted at this Sudarshan TV, and it actually, had this agenda of bringing in the infiltration, the so-called, somehow they had come up with this agenda of discussing upon the so-called infiltration of Muslim candidates into the Union Public Service Commission or the UPSC posts. So that was considered to be highly, very inflammable in nature, as in that it had potential to cause disturbance in the society, and thus a ban was put up by the Supreme Court on telecast of that particular issue or the particular program. So it made a distinction between freedom of expression and propagation of hate, and the Supreme Court said that this particular program had the potential of propagating the hate in the society, and thus it would not be violative of freedom of expression to put ban on such a program. So this was all for this article, and this actually gives us the entire agenda or the entire way in which a court should function in order to hit the right balance between, firstly, safeguarding the rights of people at large for the freedom of speech and expression and freedom of knowledge or the right to information, and also the duty of the court to ensure that no such content is brought up in the public domain that has the potential of causing any kind of social or moral disturbance in the society. With this, let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about the differently abled community. So around 75 years ago, the United Nations was created to reaffirm faith in dignity and worth of humans and in equal right for men and women. Obviously, so that was one of the most basic agenda which was chosen up in the United Nations Charter when it was like in 1945, when it was first made up after the League of Nations. So the United Nations fundamental value, it stays upon practice tolerance and endorse values of equality. But the question currently is that how much in today's scenario have we been able to reach or stand up to the mark of this value that we once had chosen for ourselves through the United Nations framework. This we will be understanding through the scenario as to how much have we been able to make ourselves acceptable and inclusive when it comes to the differently abled community. So according to the statistics, let's discuss that what are the statistics that tell about the differently abled community. So 15% of the world's population has some form of disability, which is the largest global minority. So this has come according to the World Health Organization. It says that 15% of the world's population comes in the category of disability. And in a way, statistically and technically, disability or persons with disability become the largest global minority, keeping aside all the religious and everything. If we try to analyze it all cumulatively, so they are considered to be the largest global minority. And around 80% of the estimate population live in developing countries. So this is something, a bigger challenge even, that is offered towards the movement or towards the growth of the, if we would say against the growth of the developing countries, because of these 15% of the world's population, 80% of them they live in the developing countries. And if we talk specifically about India, 73.6% of persons living with disabilities in India are outside the labor force. So this is according to the census of 2011, which we currently are following. And as we know that after every 10 years, we have a census of counting the total population. So according to the latest one, which we are currently following, is of 2011, 73.6% of persons are living with disabilities in India. Now, this is something that we really need to understand, is that in India, if we consider people that are physically well, mentally they're sound and everything, even they are at so much risk and are vulnerable due to the social injustices or social inequalities that are prevalent, unfortunately, in our society. Now, in such a scenario, consider that what could be the sufferings or the plight of people who are already in a minority section or who are already oppressed and further belong to the persons with disability sector. So they actually are further exploited. And surveys have told that even amongst these, women have been the worst hit. Women and also the mentally challenged people have been the worst hit section amongst the persons with disabilities. And consider during the time of COVID-19, when people had to face so much of crunch, be it in the health sector, economy, education, or any of it, what could be the plight that the people or the persons with disabilities had to suffer? And just imagine that, has the government even been more sensitive towards them or not? Hardly any specific steps have been taken in this regard since the time of COVID-19 has hit India. Now let's see that how are the differently abled communities affected. So continuing discrimination denies them of access to education, of course, because keeping in mind the kind of infrastructure, the teaching methods that we still follow, many students, specifically those who are visually challenged, they are not able to avail education in the most effective manner, because most of our text and study material are just not available in the Braille language that they can actually understand, and even the infrastructure is not so supportive. Then second, access to healthcare, because obviously we know that the facilities or even the schemes in India that are available are not so easily to be accessed. Then access to employment and other opportunities, because many a times our parameters for choosing and a so-called efficient candidate for a particular job, it actually stands out to be in such a manner that the people who are suffering with some kind of disabilities actually they fall out, and that is the reason why in India they 73.6% are still outside the labor force, and they never ever in their whole lifetime become even the part of the labor force. Now, the second thing that we need to tackle is the stigma that is attached to the persons with disabilities, added with the lack of understanding of their rights. Now, this was something that we just discussed yesterday, that we, being citizens who are, so-called in the apostrophe, we consider to be normal, we actually think that we are the normal beings and they are some of the other way, in some of the other way are not normal. Now, this kind of understanding or outlook towards the society creates the indifference towards them and creates the inequality at the very first instance. So at the very first baby step that we take, we should firstly remove entirely this social stigma that exists against these persons with disabilities. And secondly, we need to understand that they have equal access to rights as much as we have. And that is why we should in no way consider them to be falling apart and should be considered to be as much as equal part of the society as we consider ourselves to be. And this outlook actually makes it very difficult for them to attain valued functioning and the capabilities deemed essential for human development, as also it had been quoted by Amartya Sen, who is one of the best economists that we know in India, and he has been focusing a lot upon the concept of development. And he also says that if such outlook is carried for a longer period term in a society, it actually makes these persons with disabilities devoid of the capabilities that are essential for their human development. Then next, COVID-19 pandemic has had hit a worst impact on marginalized community, as we just discussed, due to the lack of access to digital platforms as well. Now, because we know that from the time of COVID-19, we have been following the norm of social distancing. At least we have been trying to follow the norm of social distancing. And in such a scenario, digital access or the digital technologies have come very handy for the people. But unfortunately, this was also something that persons with disabilities did not have very handy with themselves, and that is why it has created a further divide in the society. Let's see now that what are the steps that are needed in this regard. Firstly, Indian education requires a fine understanding of the diverse needs of children and their families. So according to the UNESCO's 2019 State of Education Report in India, it says that the education system in India needs to be kept, very infrastructure the infrastructure should be very healthy, and also it should be very accessible, and it should be very friendly as well. Just yesterday we discussed about a very good campaign that the government of India is running, which is known as the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan, or the Accessible India campaign, wherein a focus is being laid to make the infrastructure, be it of health, education, employment, etc., in such a manner that it is more friendly and accessible to the persons with disabilities. Next, further measures to ensure quality education for every child. So this actually runs in line with the targets of Agenda 2030 with Sustainable Development Goal number 4. And next, and the final one, is the appropriate investment on youths who are disabled, because obviously it is high time that we consider them to be as very, very potential assets for the nation, and we work in the similar direction. Now with this, this is the Sustainable Development or these SDG number 4, which has these sub goals associated with it, like quality primary or secondary education for all, early childhood and pre-primary education, equal access to TVET, which is the vocational and educational trainings, and higher education, skill development, decent work, etc. So these are the things you can go through them anytime. Now let's see that what do we have for news and flash today. Firstly, Barbados to remove Queen Elizabeth as head of the state. So as we know that United Kingdom had a lot of colonies, and till date many of them considered themselves to be the not in correct sense to be colonies of United Kingdom, but in a way they consider Queen Elizabeth to be head of the state. But now breaking that thing, a former British colony, it became actually independent in 1966, but it maintained a formal link with British monarch. Barbados Governor General said that Barbados will attain full sovereignty and become a republic in its 55th anniversary of independence. Now this here, as you can see, is the Barbados. It's a very small island, and this actually is the Caribbean. These are all known to be as the Caribbean islands. So this, somewhere here we have the United Kingdom. This is the area at large we are studying. This is the Caribbean Sea actually, and this, you must have all seen the movie Pirates of the Caribbean Sea. So this was the area which was the center of discussion in that movie. So this is something that falls exactly between the North America and the South America, and this is the Caribbean Sea. So this is the Caribbean Sea, and these are all Caribbean islands. One of those is Barbados, which is now going to declare itself to be as a republic. Secondly, Lok Sabha passed Banking Regulation Amendment Bill. The bill seeks to bring cooperative banks under the supervision of RBI. Now, since as we know that in the wake of the economic stress that the entire country is facing, the cooperative sector also needs a lot of support, and that is why this Banking Regulation Amendment Bill will actually bring the cooperative banks under the supervision of Reserve Bank of India. With the new law, the cooperative bank with prior approval of the Reserve Bank of India may also issue equity shares, preference shares, or special shares by public issue or private placements. Basically, shares are nothing; they are just the instruments of debt. And now, cooperative banks would be given more of a freedom and a greater area to work into. And under the supervision of RBI, they will be able to do this as well. Now, thirdly, Rajya Sabha passed the Institute of Teaching and Research in Ayurveda Bill 2020. So the bill seeks to accord status of national importance to a Jamnagar-based cluster of Ayurveda institutes, namely Institute of Postgraduate Teaching and Research in Ayurveda, Gulab Kunwarba Ayurveda Mahavidyalay, and Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. Fourthly, India joined Djibouti Code of Conduct or the Jeddah Amendment as observer. So Djibouti Code of Conduct or the Jeddah Amendment is a grouping on maritime matters. Please keep in mind, a very potential prelims question can come from this, wherein it can come that what is the nature of the Djibouti Code of Conduct. So basically it is a grouping on maritime matters, comprising 18 member states adjoining the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, east coast of Africa, and island countries in Indian Ocean region. So the current observers of this are India, Japan, Norway, UK, and the US. So we should know that the Djibouti Code of Conduct has been signed between, or who are the members currently, the current observers of it, and India has recently joined it, and who all are the total number of members, and what are the areas that it will be adjoining in totality. So this was all for today. We hope it was an informative session for you. Stay tuned with LawSikho for such more sessions to come. Thank you so much.